Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Jonathan Mon's The Power of One webinar today. We are going to give everyone a few minutes to join before we get started.
Hi, Ali. Good afternoon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jonathan Mon's The Power of One webinar. Jonathan's core focus as a facilitator and mentor is driving valuation by helping companies break through their barriers to growth, as well as finding their hidden cash. Jonathan saves companies from going broke. He has over 15 years of experience as a chief financial officer and sits on over 12 advisory boards. At the end of today's presentation, Jonathan will introduce a complimentary offer on behalf of the multi-funding team that you can register for in our post-webinar form at the end of today's session. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so if you could hold your questions till then, that would be great. Thank you for joining us today. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Ali, and good afternoon to everybody. And I'm going to say good morning from Melbourne, Australia. It's a little after 6 here, but that's okay. Ready to get into it, ready to start my day. And thank you, everybody, for attending this morning. So, Ali, just double checking. Oh, you can see the slide, creating strategy from my financials?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So we can get the ball rolling. All right, welcome, everybody. So before I begin, just a little bit about myself. I've got a Bachelor of Business Accounting. I did an MBA a few years back. I started and sold a retail fashion company, so I understand the concept of cash flow, the lack of cash flow and cash flow keeping you up at night. Once I sold that, I went back to my roots in accounting and did CFO consulting. And in 2018, to expand my knowledge and to really help with, once I prepared a lot of reports for boards, etc., that I joined Scaling Up, the Scaling Up organization, became a certified coach. And basically, you know, as a coach, I help companies scale and grow, but my core focus is really helping them with their finances, and in particular, as Ali said, finding their hidden cash, the oxygen of all businesses. So before I start, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Ami, Ali, and the team at Multifunding. They've been awesome in supporting me and putting on these little webinars, and I look forward always to talking to the team, visiting them, and working with them in the future. So as a CEO, as a general manager, as a person sitting at the top of their organization, to be successful, you must have a thorough understanding of the factors that drive your valuation. So today, to help us understand the factors that drive valuation, we use a software package called Cashflow Story. And Cashflow Story, you've been given a copy of the report, and that's actually what we're going to go through today. And for simplicity today, I've got numbers at the bottom of every slide, and that relates to the number on the page of the report. And what I love about Cashflow Story, it helps simplify the numbers, makes it really easy, and brings your whole team together. It defines the difference between cash and profit, which most teams don't understand. A lot of teams, a lot of companies really focus on profit without understanding the drivers of cash. And sometimes I see a lot of teams that are dry when it comes to the cash, but their profit is very healthy. And they guys come to me and they say, why am I seeing great profit, but no cash in the bank? And then finally, it helps you make better decisions, Cashflow Story, because it has the power of one, which we're going to go through today. And just by understanding those 1% changes or one-day changes, what massive impact we can have on any business. So just to highlight there, you can see the page number. Just look for that when you're following with my slides. So today's case study is a company called Forever Furniture. Now, Forever Furniture, indoor and outdoor furniture company, they're really in wholesale. They've got a little bit of retail, just one outlet and a little bit online, but really they're into supporting, or they supply places like motels and hotels and fit outs, whether it be restaurants or shops, but they're basically commercial furniture for companies out there. And as a whole, they're profitable and growing. The owner is really focused on profit, and it strives for a 45% margin, which means that when they're selling, their sales team, everything that leaves the building has to have a 45% margin on it. And one of the things about the owner is he came to me and he said, I've made a profit, but I can't see the cash and I don't understand why. So we're going to go through all these things today and have a look at what's going on with Gary's furniture, with Forever Furniture. The owner is Gary. And Gary actually said to me, he has an exit target in the next few years of $10 million. So at the moment, he has a valuation of around 8.5 million, but really, if he was to accept that 8.5 million, he'd only be left with about 4.8 million in his hand. So he's saying to me, I want to sell in 3 years, but I want $10 million in my hand when I sell. I said, sure, Gary, let's have a look at that. Let's understand what's going on in your business. So let's get started. Here's a copy, and this is how the report starts. And it says to me, have a look at Gary's performance from a P&L perspective. We can see revenue, he is up 2.5 million to $24 million. His gross margin, final gross margin, remember he likes to start at 45. His final gross margin ends up at 37.5, which is up a little over 1% for the year. And his operating profit is slightly up, just under 1% to just short of 10%, 9.58. So not a bad performance by Gary and the team at Forever Furniture. I mentioned to you at the start that Gary has an estimated value of around $8 to $8.5 million, but he would only be left with 4.8 million cash in hand. And so what's happened with Gary, if we take a multiple of 4 on his profits, in other words, if we take his profit and put it out there and say, hey, we can get 4 times the profit, that gives us roughly the $8.5 million. But he's got debt in this business, and this debt, once he pays that out, he'd only be left with about 4.8 million. And that's why he's one of the reasons why he's come and said, hey, can you help me get not the valuation necessarily that I need, more the cash in hand that I want? And this is all in the report. It gives me all these details and shows me where I can actually, the understanding of exactly what's going on in the business and everything like that. So I said, Gary, no problem. Let's have a look at what's going on. The first and most important thing, Gary, is that within any set of financials are 7 drivers that control cash and profit at any one time. Particular price, a movement in price or volume, or the cost of the goods that you're selling and overheads, if we can control those, they can impact cash and profit at any one point in time. And they can actually, we measure those in percentage. Receivables, so our AR, our inventory, and our payable days, we measure in days, and they impact only the cash at bank at any one point in time. And so we've got the 4 that impact cash and profit and the 3 that impact just cash. Now, if you recall what I said at the beginning, to be a successful CEO, you have to must have a thorough understanding of the factors that drive valuation. This is the starting point in improvement on valuation, because improving cash reduces debt, improving profit improves our ability to actually sell it as a multiple, and that's where we're going to drive valuation in this business. So, Gary, did you know that if I measure the 4 first measurements, which are percent, price increase, volume increase, cost of goods reduction, and overheads, if I measure those in 1%, did you know a 1% increase in your price, that's all you have to do, will have a $190,000 impact on cash and a $240,000 impact on profit. Volume, interesting, Gary. You go out there and you sell, you improve by $2.5 million. But you only really improve your cash by 43,000, and then your operating profit was only 90. That's huge, Gary. Look at the impact on cash versus volume in this business. But then at the same time, look what happens when you reduce your cost of goods by 1%. I can have an impact of 147,000 on cash and 150,000 on profit. So Gary, I know you're out there pushing really hard on volume, but look at some of the other levers that are going to get you to increase your cash, improve your profit, and more importantly, improve your valuation. Overheads, just a 67,000 and 67,000. If we can reduce that by 1%, interesting. You keep on pushing on volume, but overheads is a way to go. And then finally, the way to improve cash and working through working capital, which we'll get to shortly, Gary, accounts receivable, inventory, and accounts payable, they're all around 65,000 for 1 day movement in receivables. Inventory and payables are 41,000 each. So clearly, Gary, without even doing too much, as the CEO, if you can control these, you can start to have an impact on that valuation target that you've got. But Gary says to me, Jonathan, great, you've shown me this, but how do I do it? What do I need to do? Can I just go out there and put a price increase? What's my strategies around that? How do I increase volume? What's my cost of goods reduction? Gary, this is great, because what we can do now is, if you think about it, different people in your organization control different areas of these levers. So you might have sales and marketing control price and volume. You've got operations, buying team that control cost of goods. Your accounts or financial controller might control the overheads with budgeting, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, you've got the accounts team that are controlling AR and AP. And then you've got the controllers, the stock or inventory controllers controlling the inventory. So what we should do, let's actually get these people in a room and let's start strategizing on some little action plans that we can do and we can bring to the table that are going to help you hit these targets. And this is what I call a Power of One workshop. It's really simple. Already I've engaged the team. I've showed them the slide previously. I've taken the notes out of the slide. You can see the value. If I have the driver, I've got cash at 190,000, profit at 240. And we can start putting things in order of what we want to do. So the team as a whole have come up with a number of options. I don't necessarily need to go through all these options. I've done many of these workshops and got 1,000 little options that are available under each of these. But they're unique to your organization, to your company. So they work differently for different people. In this particular place, this particular company, we found a number of these options. Now that I've documented, it's taken about 90 minutes to 2 hours to go through this. I don't mind spending as much time as we need, as long as we get an understanding of the things that we want to achieve. And then, of course, we need to allocate people against these. We need to put in, call them priorities. We need to allocate people, and we need to monitor and make sure that these particular actions are actually, people are going through with them, and we need to keep them accountable. So we've spent the 2 hours, we've come up with this workshop where basically probably 2.5 hours into a session now, because we went through a bit of the report as well. And all of a sudden, I've created whatever it is, 12 to 13, 14, 15 little options. Strategic options are going to move on the valuation of this business. So at the end, we decided, hey, we need to understand it. We need to, from a measuring perspective. So we said, you know what, price, let's push on 0.5%. Let's see if we can get 0.5% on price, volume for each of these options, costs, overheads, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just measure it as a whole. Probably receivables, we could push a little bit harder. And this is what happens. Gary, if you can improve your price, we had 5 options, so 2.5, 0.5% on each. Then the volume increase 3, cost of goods 3, and overhead reduction 2. I know that we can push harder on the accounts receivable days and the inventory days, and we'll get to that shortly, why I came to that conclusion through a bit of a health check. But most important, what I've done here is I've created through these 15 little accountability priorities, I've actually created $1.9 million of profit, and I call of cash, and sorry, $1.6 million of cash and 1.45 of profit. And what I call these is the hidden cash. That's because we're finding ways to generate and make additional cash. The ones at the bottom here are sitting in your system, and we'll explain that shortly. But the top ones are the hidden cash that we never went after previously. We didn't try and work hard to get them or understand them, how to get them. And so now we've discovered a whole lot of cash. And if you recall, Gary had $3.7 million worth of debt within his company. So now that we've generated a whole lot of cash, we've reduced the debt, we've got a valuation increase now, all of a sudden, we've generated almost $6.3 million worth of impact on his valuation through debt reduction, together with the extra profitability. Gary now has, through Forever Furniture, has a potential to get in hand, if it went to market and got that 4 times multiple on his profit, he would have an improved business value now worth over $11 million. So I've taken it from 4 to 11, 4.8 to be precise, to 11 million through these small little actions. It's taken us probably 2.5 to 3 hours in a workshop to generate the ideas, allocate them to people, put a system of accountability in play through meetings, etc. And all of a sudden, Gary's now got a target that he can go after, whether it takes him a year or 2 years to hit it, but he understands exactly the things that he needs to do to drive, or the strategy he needs to drive his valuation. So I mentioned a couple of things in there that I haven't gone through just yet, particularly around accounts receivable and payable and inventory days. Why did we get to this? So let's have a look at a bit of a health check for Forever Furniture. Let's start with the profit. We know that Gary made $1.5 million, up on 300 from the previous year, through his revenue of 24 million, which was up 2.5. Little bit of advice, Gary. These are the things that if you want to drive your valuation from a multiples perspective, from a buyer being really interested, here's some of the little things that they're looking at. 1, revenue growth versus cost of goods. You are doing a great job here because your revenue is growing greater than your cost of goods. Excellent. That's what I call economies of scales are kicking in now. We're maximizing our sales and by our volume and able to negotiate and improve our cost of goods, our gross margin. This is a great thing when it comes to a business. We want to see that across the board. The next one, Gary, though, I'm a little bit concerned is your revenue growth at 11.6, okay? But your overheads have grown quicker than your revenue, and it's consistent. We can see across the board here that it came the previous year, and now it's happened again. Gary, we're not maximizing your overheads. You're investing in people, in office, in overheads in office, whether it's people, whether it's IT systems, whatever it is, your overheads have grown quicker than your revenue. That tells me we've got to tweak it. We've got to fix the overheads and maximize the investment you have made in that area. Now, over a period of time, you may have spent extra money, whether it's upgrading something or whether it's a new warehouse, etc., and that can impact the revenue versus overheads, but that's okay. As long as we see it decline the previous years, I'm not fussed, but someone will look at this and go, what's happening? So there's a little bit of a health check around your P&L, your profit and loss. Now let's have a look at your balance sheet. And this is what I call the working capital. So it's accounts receivable plus your inventory minus your accounts payable gives us our working capital. In numbers, we've got 5 million plus 3.2 minus the 3.5. In other words, other people are paying for this through the accounts payable, leaving us 4.7 million. So think about money owed into your stock, use other people's money, and that's where our working capital. So before I go there, the most important thing about this, and this is the challenge where I'm training teams, this is where your cash gets stuck. And to explain this, I want to show you what it looks like in the day of a life that we work. And in particular for teams that come on board, and I'm explaining to the senior leadership team the difference between profit and cash. And it's really important I do this because, as I said to you, I see companies that have made profit but have got no cash. In fact, I got a call recently from a company that said, I've almost made $1 million and my bank hasn't gone up. What is going on in my business? Can you please give me a health check and explain what's going on? So every day we go to work and we earn an income. In some cases, some companies pay weekly, they pay every 2 weeks, or they might pay monthly. But let's assume from a perspective of one day that you go to work, you earn an income of $300. Let's just take that as the number. Let's call that a P&L item. In other words, we've generated $300 worth of income, but of course, we haven't seen that. So from a cash perspective, which normally, of course, sits in our balance sheet, we don't see that $300 because we're getting paid much later. But to get to work, we need to fill up on gas, or we need to buy a ticket on public transport or take a train or bus. So you can see we've got an expense. Let's assume that we're filling up our tank with gas, and we've got an expense of $10 because it cost us $5 each way to get to work. But we actually spent $50 in filling up our tank. So think about this from an inventory perspective that we've spent our cash and it's sitting in gas, sitting in our car. Along the way, we buy a coffee. All right, we'll call that $4.50 from an expense perspective. Again, we've spent cash. So we're starting to spend cash now. We've already spent $54. Even though we've made the money, we haven't seen any, we're digging into our cash. And then finally, we get some lunch. So our expenses, again, $8, but let's use a credit card. This time, we'll call that our AP. So from a day, we can clearly see that we had $10 worth of gas, $4.50 on the coffee, $8 from our lunch. All of a sudden, we've spent $22. We made $300. So from our day in a profit and loss, we've made $277.50. Excellent, not a bad day. However, no cash came in. We're owed that cash. It's our AR, it's our accounts receivable. But our expenses were $22.50 to get there. Our cash flow has gone negative 54.5 because we filled up our tank. Remember, I called it a bit of an expense and a bit of stock. And of course, we bought a coffee. And then finally, we used a credit card. So now, from a working capital perspective, we are owed $300 being our wages. Our inventory is $40, the gas that's in our tank, and our credit card that we owe. So you can clearly see now that if I took 300 plus 40 is 340 minus the 8, $332 is our working capital needs from going to work every day. What's interesting though is imagine, and we can't do this, but imagine this was we were a company as a person, we took on multiple jobs and we needed to repeat this every day on multiple levels. Assume there's 2 or 3 people in your family and you all start with the same amount of cash or a combined amount of cash, and you all needed gas and you all needed lunch and you all needed coffee. By the end of the day, you know, this incredible profit and loss where you're showing heaps of or lots of income coming in, but you actually haven't got the cash. And over a period of time, as you grow and more members were going to work, or in a business sense, you'd be growing as a business, you'd slowly but surely start running out of cash. And that's what's happening in businesses that I go see. So that's our example. That's a really great way to break through for teams so that we can teach them the concept of cash versus profit and loss. And why do I like to do that? Because then our brain start focusing on cash within the business and how to maximize it, how to find it, and how to make sure that it hits our bank account. Going back to our friends at Forever Furniture with Gary, the most important thing that I can see here is it proportional, Gary? Is the growth that you have had, your accounts receivable up by $1 million, et cetera, is that proportional? In other words, if what you should be is around 5 million. If you were to double your sales, would it go to 10 million? Would inventory go to 6.2? What's the measure? How do I measure to see the consistency in your working capital needs and what's going on in there? And to do that, I use days. I measure it in days. I mentioned to you earlier in the power of one that the days is in the working capital. And I can see here, Gary, from accounts receivable, you're up to 5 million. You're 5 million at the moment, up by 1 million. But really, you used to, in measuring it, it's taking it used to take 67 to 68 days in your collection, but that's actually gone out to 76. Your inventory has gone out to 78 from 67, and your accounts payable has gone out from 80 to 85. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's taking longer to pay people. The actual physical inventory is taking longer to be sold, and your accounts receivable is taking longer to be collected. So while it's gone up by $1.2 million, Gary, I think it's too high. I really believe that you're not managing this now. You're becoming lazy. In fact, I've got a measurement here that can tell me you're lazy when it comes. I'll show you the measurement in a minute. I can show you the laziness when it comes to your balance sheet and the cash that you're not collecting, you're leaving on the table for the moment. So now you're telling me you're getting tight with your cash. Well, now you know why. Gary, why don't we train the team on cash? And here's a brilliant KPI that I recommend that all teams manage and monitor in their business. It's called our working capital timeline. And in simple terms, it's how long does it take for $1 to leave our bank account and come back in? So we can see in the last period, Gary, your inventory arrived on day dot. We sold the inventory on day 67. Now, in simple terms, another term for sold inventory, we raise an invoice. We're now owed money. However, we paid our debts, our creditors on day 80. And then finally on day 135, we got paid. So this particular bill, if you recall, it was about 80 odd days. So from the time we raised the invoice to the time, or 76 days, from the time that we raised the invoice to the time the cash is banked, okay, is about 80 odd days. Look at that, Gary, it's taking 55 days last period from the time that you paid your creditors to the time that you got paid. That blue line is money leaving your account and then coming back in. That was last period. Unfortunately, Gary, you've gone a little lazy when it comes to managing your balance sheet, your working capital. Inventory, what's happened now? Inventory arrives. We sell inventory on day 78. We've raised that invoice. 7 days later, we have to pay our creditors. Then 69 days later after that, Gary, the blue line here, you're finally getting paid. That has blown out from 55 days, our timeline, which again, I wouldn't have been happy about. I still think you can improve it there. Now it's gone to 69. The impact on your cash at bank, Gary, now remember, this is not profit. This is your profit being left on the table, not coming back into your business, is $782,000. I'm going to call that the measurement of laziness. Gary, can we please, I don't mind if the number's not there, can we please implement a KPI in this business for all your teams involved in your working capital timeline, the number of days it takes for us to, or for you to, pay money and then see the money back in your bank account? Because 15 days or 14 days has already had an impact of $782,000. It's a massive number. No wonder you can't see your cash. But just to confirm that, Gary, you originally said to me, I've made profit, but I can't see the cash. Well, remember we go working capital. I'm telling you now, Gary, it's locked in your working capital. You made $1.5 million. I'm going to go back one slide. It was up by $1.2 million. You can see over here, $1.2 million. You made $1.5 million. The working capital that you needed was 1.2. You've only generated $300,000 of cash in your bank, has filtered through, has flown through from the $1.5 million because it's locked in your working capital, Gary. So do you remember we spoke about the power of one, the number of days, how if we improve the days, it improves cash. We'll get back to the minute. But what's really interesting about Gary's business is his sister works in the business. Well, not she works next to him because she's got her own little company called Forever Design Service. And Forever Design Service is independent of Gary's because she just does the designs for the hotels, motels, restaurants, retail outlets, whoever's buying furniture. She actually has her own design service. And so Sally heard me talking and she joined me on the conversation and said, I've got my own problems. Can you have a look at what's going in my place? And why do I like this and why have I brought this in and why is Sally part of this? Because it's a service, and service has a different feel to it when it comes to working capital. So first things first, Sally, we're going to shoot through this quickly. Okay, your revenue is only around just under $3 million, but what concerns me is your net profit is actually negative. You're losing money. But Sally says, but I don't really feel it because I've got money, I've got cash. So all right, let's have a little bit of a dive, a bit of a review. And I can see that Sally does an incredible job of managing her working capital. So her payable days are around 30 versus 38 the previous year. She has no inventory. So for people out there that have got service, think about this. This is the part where you're providing just the service to your clients. You're only really got people, and there's not as many levers that we can tweak because we're not carrying inventory and we're not carrying stock. So this is the people management side of the Power of One. So accounts payable has gone up. This is mainly stock. She does buy stock when she completes the service at the time, only when people order it. And so her working capital is down by 239 on the previous year, which means she only needs 31,000 for her working capital. Most important is this is filtered through to her bank. So she's actually taking all the investments from previous years and it's sitting in her bank now. And that's why she can see cash, but she doesn't feel too concerned and can't understand why she's losing money. So very quick look at Sally's her working capital timeline. I can see it used to be 17 days from the time money left until the time that money came in. But she's done such a great job. In fact, Sally collects the money before she even pays it. She raises the invoice now on day 0. She gets the money comes in on day 27 on average, and then 3 days later, she actually pays her creditor. And for that, she can generate $227,000 worth of cash, even though she is actually losing money. So very quickly, we can see that the loss is 141, but the capital that she's generated through the working capital contribution that she's generated has actually impacted her business. So ultimately, you can see that she's able to generate $100,000 worth of cash. So Sally, a very quick look at the things that we can do in your business because you're slightly different. We need to improve. You can put your prices up, your volume can increase. Cost of goods is really around people because you're only using people to help you design. We can actually work on better ways to become more efficient and things that we're doing and work with our teams better to make them more efficient. And then, of course, we don't have inventory. So it's really around the receivables and the payables. You've got less options and a completely different way of looking at ways of actually improving your business. So Sally, the most important thing that I want to do for you is I want to make you profitable. What are the things that you need to do this year to become profitable? Sally, you have to increase your price by 5%. Let's get volume up. We only need to do volume up by 4%. We only need to reduce our cost by 1%. So this is people management. We need to find 1% of efficiencies within your cost of goods or within your design team, because that's who they are at the end of the day. That's your cost of goods. All right. And we need to reduce your overheads by a couple of percent along the way as well. And so if we can do that, we go from a negative profit of $128,000 to an additional $269,000, we can turn that into $140,000, or sorry, $269,000 worth of additional profit. Ultimately, you've turned it around and now you're making $140,000. This is a simple strategy for Sally. She can work with me as a coach or whatever way she wants, but there are so many little tweaks that we can do through the workshop. Again, a slightly different workshop, but we can do a workshop to help Sally through the Power of One go from a negative to a positive when it comes to her profitability. I've mentioned to you that I like to work with teams. Here's a couple of relationships. I call this the relationship within the Power of One that we can work with teams. Start with here, a price increase versus volume increase. I've already mentioned to you that look at the difference in the teams. I'm not telling anyone not to go after volume, but your sales teams understand the relationship so you can strive to have a price increase get your brain thinking or your mind thinking, can I get a price increase first before a volume increase? I don't want to not get the volume increase, but I wonder what I can do to get that 1% price increase. It's a mind shift in the way we sell. Again, over the workshop, we can talk about it. We can work out ways. It's all part of understanding. If we understand the levers, then we can talk about ways to bringing them alive. I often get sales teams that say to me that if I lose 1%, if I was to put my price up by 1%, I will lose some volume. Well, in this particular case, if you were to put your prices up and lose, you'd have to lose 2.6% of volume to be equal on the profit there. And in fact, your cash flows actually works out better in the end. That's for another reason, which I won't go through today. But ultimately, you can actually play. If you can play within that field, you can become more profitable. Most people, most companies that I've worked with, particularly in the last 2 years, they put their prices up and have not seen any volume decrease. Last year, through inflationary periods, the number one comment I got from people as we went through this process and they argued about putting prices up 4, 5, 6%, was that in the end, they said, I wish I took it up to 8 or 9%. I missed that chance. But price increase is available for everybody out there. It's just about the way you go about it. And so everybody that I worked with last year, they actually improved their gross margins, final gross margins, through price increases. And because we did price increases greater than the inflationary impact on their business. Another thing that we can do is a cost of goods reduction. If you recall, it was worth $147 on cash and $150,000 on profit. So we know that this particular company always strived for 45, but ended up on 38 through losses, through poor buying of some stock, et cetera, et cetera. Don't need to go into it, but ultimately they lost 7%. That 7% was worth $1 million on cash, lost, left behind, and $1 million on profit. You can see, you can basically say right now, operations team, what can we do to reduce what I call the leaky bucket? I don't believe that you can hit the 7%, but wow, if we could hit a couple of percent, then we're going to have a massive impact on this business. Then finally, I mentioned to you about the power of, that Gary was taking too long through his working capital. His inventory had gone out, his receivables had taken too long to come in, and his accounts payables had gone out as well, which is a good thing because that is positive on cash. I can see here a one-day movement on receivables will generate $65,000. If you recall, it was around 75, 76. Imagine, and it was up something like 8 days, call it even 10. If we impacted 10 days, he can slip through or push through $650,000 of just cash. This is not profit. This is the cash that's sitting out there that Gary needs to pull back in. Inventory, come on, Gary, it's been blowing out. We need to understand what's going on. Let's get a much better system of buying and planning our inventory. And then accounts payables, look, it's okay. No one's complaining, but I don't like that. I want to pay quickly for one reason, and that is reputation. When your reputation is intact, when you're the best seller out there, then people want to deal with you. That's when you can start negotiating better prices, etc., which are going to impact on your cost of goods, which we mentioned earlier. So Gary, that's the rules. This is how we can grow your business. This is how we can get, more importantly, the valuation up to $10 million. But what I will need to do, Gary, is we need to measure this. Quite often I walk into businesses and all the time I implement the financial links as scoreboard. But why do I do it? Because what I tend to see is companies that do this. They tell you how they've gone on their profit and loss for the quarter or for the year or for the month. That's what they're measuring. Nobody's measuring the working capital score. Nobody's measuring our ability to pull our cash in from our profit. So if I've implemented the working capital score, we understand what good, acceptable, bad is. And every month or every quarter, in particular, teams need to report this, because if I don't see it moving in the right direction, in particular for some companies that have blown out, like Gary, wouldn't expect it overnight, but we need it to move over a period of time. I want to see it moving in the right direction. And if we're not seeing that, then we need to talk about that, particularly at a quarterly meeting. We'll go through that. We'll implement some strategic changes, and we'll understand. And in particular, we will bring that in and get strategies to drive the movement in our favor when it comes to working capital. Just a little bit of a note, Gary. I know at some point we have to go to the bank because we know we need to upgrade our warehouse. just to show you, your bank has one objective. It's to loan you money and get that money back. In particular, this is what the bank's going to look at, Gary. It's going to say, why is Forever Furniture generating $1.5 million of profit, yet it's only net profit, the only cash flow it generated and pushed into its bank account was 300. So it's like a fifth of what you're doing. Gary, what's going wrong? These are the things that the bank's looking for. So based on that, I say, Gary, let's attack this head on. We're going to go to the bank, and this we haven't had, and it's only slightly moving because it takes a bit of time as we work on our working capital. Let's show them exactly what we're doing to generate the additional cash flow within our business. Let's show them the tactics we're put in. Let's show them what it used to be, how we're moving it, and what's going on in the business. I think if we told them our story, it's going to make life a lot easier for us. So just as a last thing, Gary, I know you've got your projections for the year. We've got some priorities, that in particular, some spending that we need to do. I've got an idea. Why don't we take, and this is through cash flow story, again, it can generate a projection. It can tell you where you're going to be at the end of the year. And in particular, we can create different scenarios so that we can generate different KPIs to hit those scenarios. Gary, this is what's going to happen. You've mentioned to me you want a new CRM. It's going to cost us $70,000. We need a new salesperson of 120, and we need a warehouse upgrade through racking, etc., of around $100,000. Unfortunately, inflation's still around, and I'm worried we're going to lose 2% on our cost of goods. However, our new salesperson is going to generate, plus the old team, we're going to generate another 10% of sales. I've thrown that in. The system can generate a future report for me based on what we're striving for. Let's see if it works. Let's see if this makes sense to us in our movement forward. And then if it doesn't, we'll redo it and we'll start tweaking things we need to tweak to improve the business to hit the targets. So unfortunately, we're going to lose some gross margin. We said inflation's there. We're up on our revenue by $2.4 million. And that pushes on our net profit and our operating profits. So Gary, I'm a bit concerned about that, but let's keep going. Working capital has grown. If we keep this consistent, we have not changed any of the days, okay? Let's just see what happens to this business if I don't do anything in that space. Our working capital has gone up by $467,000. For what it's worth, Gary, your profit now is $832,000, but you're only, again, pushing through 365 of that. We're leaving almost $500,000 in working capital. Gary, we need to fix that. So again, let's go back. Let's tweak this. Let's have a look at it. And that's how I basically work with teams. That concludes the cash flow story part, the report, what it does, how I can train teams, how I can educate and coach teams, and how I can develop strategies for teams to actually improve their cash, their profit, and of course, their valuation. But as a coach, I've been around for a few years now, and what I find is the cash flow story has an immediate impact on the business. If you assume that you wanted to work with me or wanted to see, I should say, you wanted to see a report on your business and wanted to activate things on your business, if you gave me the report, it's in the form of a spreadsheet, you fill out a spreadsheet, we upload the spreadsheet, it gives me a report. We can strategically create options by the end of the day. It takes 15 minutes to generate the report. So what are the things that we can do as a coach under the scaling up? This is the book that drives the methodology that I work with. Cash, we know, understand your power of one. 2, people. And under scaling up, we know that we need to have the right people sitting in the right seats doing the right things. What's the best way to create all of that? And that is to create an awesome culture in your business and sell it. And what I mean by that is if you're recruiting, looking for the right people to sit in the right seats, sell your culture, tell the world what a great place it is to work when it comes to your organization. I often work with teams telling me, have you got a fridge full of beverages and food? So if I'm hungry and I want a snack, I can focus on working and think, right, I don't have to worry about lunch today. It's covered with, there's some sandwiches and some things in the fridge that I can generate. Where's your photos? Show the boss filling up the fridge for everybody. Now put it out there on social media. Tell everybody it's a really great place to work. Simple little things that you can do straight away. Second thing is we want to kill a strategy. The best thing that I have discovered, go out there and speak to your customers. Get feedback from your customers on what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Really, really simple little story. Recently, I'm working with a company that makes sliding doors for the premium sliding doors. He went out and saw his customers. He said, hey, am I the best sliding door maker in the country? And his customers turned around and said, well, you're part of 3. You're one of 3 that are out there. Do I do a great job? I said, your doors are fine. I mean, we'd recommend it. We'd recommend the other 2 as well. But I'm getting good business from you. Why? I thought my doors are the best. No, what you do really well is your after sales customer service. So as a door, as a sliding door, it's like a cavity. It needs to be inserted. There's ways of inserting this into the wall, etc. And your ability to return the call of a builder and install up within an hour or within 2 hours is what we love. They love that. It's your after customer service that we recommend that people buy your door, because we know that if they get in trouble on site, you will return the call. My customer was shocked. He had no idea that is the differentiating activity that is separating him from his customers. The whole time he thought it was a premium door. Ultimately, it was his after customer service. And the only way he found that out was hopping in his car, going for a drive and just talking to his customers. He didn't try and sell them anything. All he'd walked in and says, how am I going? What can I do better? How do I compare to my competition? And through that, we were able to, funny enough, I was only 2 weeks ago, create a whole strategy, a whole new strategy of things that we need to do in this business to take it to the next level around customer service and customer feedback. Next part is the execution. We want to execute our strategy. Best thing that I have seen, and again, only takes a few hours, is setting up basically KPIs for everybody in your organization by understanding or by setting up appropriate KPIs. I'm going to show you something in a minute called the dashboard, where we actually can measure the KPI. So here's my dashboard that I set up. It's really simple in that everybody that has a KPI understands what a good day, what a good week, what a good month, and what a good year actually means in the role that they're sitting within this company, within this organization. What I've also found is really important is that when I ask general managers or the CEOs sitting at the top, what's your KPI? Most people say to me, oh, it's net profit or valuation. And I say, great, no problem with that. But let me ask you a question. If everybody in your business was physically hitting their KPIs for the month, for the quarter, for the year, what sort of business would you have? Everyone says to me, I'd have a great business. I said, would you worry about your profit and your valuation? Or do you think that would take care of itself if we had great KPIs that everyone strive for? Everyone said, yeah, it would all take care of itself. So then I said, well, surely your number one priority, your number one KPI should be making sure that everybody that works for you is hitting their KPIs. So are you talking to them? Are you making sure they've got the tools to achieve? Are they the right person, or do you know I need to replace them? But I know that all of those KPIs, we're hitting what I call color code green. We measure them in, sometimes we measure them in colors. By having them in the right color all the way through, I'm going to hit that profit. I'm going to hit that valuation. So Mr. General Manager, Mr. CEO, can I ask you, or Mr. CEO, can I ask you to spend time making sure everybody in your team is A, happy, B, has the tools, C, has the processes, and D, can actually hit their KPIs. And so there's some little tips that I like to put out there and help people with. They're things that I've noticed over the last 4, 5, 6 years that I've been coaching have had immediate impact on businesses. So now that pretty much, where are we at? We're into almost an hour. Ali mentioned at the start of the session that today we've got a special multi-funding offer, a complimentary free 30-minute kickoff call to get the ball rolling for anybody that would love to have a health check, would love to understand their power of one. And remember, I often get this question is, but I've got a CFO, or I've got an accounts team, or I've got an accountant. Your accountant looks after your compliance and probably manages your tax for you. Your accounts team or finance manager probably generates what I call an historical P&L. In other words, by the time you've got the P&L, let's say we're getting, it's the 10th of the month today, the 11th, you should be getting your P&Ls from the previous month. That's gone. That's 10 days ago. So they're always historical. And they can generate a cash flow projection for you and tell you what's going on. But the power of one is the next level for people sitting at the top to understand what's going to drive or create a strategy that's going to obviously improve their cash, profit, and valuation over a point of time. And that's so we can go through the power of one. All you need to do is, I've got the QR code there, Ali, that's linked to a form. All you need to do is fill that out, and we can send you the sheet that needs to be filled out, a spreadsheet, a how-to guide, and let's book in a session and you can have a review with me. And as I said, a fantastic offer from Multi-Funding this morning, complimentary offer. So I'll leave that up for a second. And that concludes this morning. Ali, you've allowed some time for Q&A?
Yeah, sure. And just for everyone, if you are unable to scan the QR code, I have sent the link into the chat for you all to fill out. We do have one question. This question is from Kim. She's asking, what specifically are you including in COGS? This was asked at the start.
Oh, cost of goods sold. My apologies. So cost of goods sold is the items that, it's the expenses incurred in generating the product or service that you sell. So in particular for Forever Furniture, for Gary, his cost of goods sold would be the furniture that comes from overseas, or whether he's made it here or modified it here. It's the teams that work physically in the factory. That's the cost. So in other words, if he wasn't selling anything, he wouldn't have any expenses there. However, his overheads are different. They're different expenses. So anyone sitting in the office, the rent, electricity, telephone bills, think about going in for a day, but we didn't actually, physically generate anything. You've still got those overheads expenses. So I'm hoping does that explain the difference between the two, what a cost of goods sold is? And why do I do it? It's a general measurement. So out in the world of business, the cost of goods sold is your gross margin. And so the gross margin is a measurement that most people look at when they're doing evaluation on a business. Does that answer the question?
I do not see a response, but Kim does have another question. She's asking, do you include labor, contractors, and labor tax?
Kim, and answer your question, labor and contractors. So if you're putting labor to whether it's manufacturing or install or to physically generate, absolutely, yes. Contractors, yes. All contractors are cost of goods sold. Labor tax, I would have to not comment on that one purely until I understood from an Australian, obviously that's a US tax. I just need to hear another couple of minutes. I need to spend 2 minutes with you understanding what the tax is and how it impacts. If it's a tax that you would pay on someone that was working, and yes, that I'm pretty sure that would be included in the cost of goods sold. That's good with that, but I would ask some further questions.
All right, I don't see any other questions. Everyone, if you do have questions, feel free to leave them in the Q&A button or in the chat box. Also, if you would prefer to ask a question verbally, you can raise your hand and I can grant you permission to speak with Jonathan.
Yeah, come in live. We've had a few people previously that asked questions. My website, jonathanmond.com. I can send you that. If you wanted all those details, I can send you that. You can see my email there as well, so you can reach out there. There you go. All silence, no other questions?
There are no further questions. This was a great session today. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
I think I am all good. Well, thank you everybody for turning up. I know it's towards the end of the day and most of you want to head home or about to finish for the day. So thank you for spending some time with me. I hope that was a benefit. I hope you learned something from today. And as I said, feel free to take advantage of the complimentary multi-funding offer today.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll talk to you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone.